a lot of the stuff that I'm helping with families is just helping them with their perspective, is reminding them is, what are you doing? Are you going to Christmas to tell your crazy uncle that he's living his life wrong? Is that why you're going there?
Probably not.
No, right? But that's what they'll talk about, and that's what they'll be worried about. Oh, I'm worried about him because he's going to talk politics, or he'll talk this, or he'll do this, and I don't know how to handle that, and he doesn't respect me, and he doesn't do this. And we just have to slow down and go, are you going to try and change him? That's not the reason you're going.
This is Ryan and Michelle, and welcome to the Celebrate MarriageCast, where we hope to restore and reclaim godly marriages through honest and real conversations.
Welcome to the show, and welcome to episode 65. But have no fear, we are not retiring from anything.
Right.
And maybe not even retiring from soccer, Ryan, right? Because you just got an invitation from our guest today for some friendly play.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that. We know that the holiday season is in full swing. Christmas will be here before we know it. Next week already, right? Yeah, next week. Crazy. And we wanted to talk about family dynamics, because we know that you likely have holiday gatherings, Christmas gatherings with your in-laws and your family and extended family, and that can bring a lot of stress. So Tony is here to help. Tony is from Suit Empowered Christian Counseling and has been a guest on the show multiple times. And Tony, we're so glad to have you back on the Celebrate MarriageCast. Welcome.
I like being here. It's always fun, and I'm excited for today.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for the pre-show invite for Ryan here.
Well, that's some rehab motivation for you.
Yeah,
now you better keep working on your rehab, buddy.
Right. Yeah. It's been a process, but hey, maybe retirement, maybe not yet.
Ryan's been doing physical therapy twice a week, Monday and Wednesdays at 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
If you're ever wondering, it's early in the
Where
morning.
I'm at,
Where's
6
Ryan at
a.m.
6 a.m. on those days?
Wednesday.
Ryan's at physical therapy, working super hard on your recovery.
Trying to get
How
back.
long do you have to wake up at 6 a.m.?
I don't know. There's
ask.
not really an end.
There's no end date.
There's no end date in sight right now, other than I think I'm at 13. I think I'm at 13 weeks post-surgery, and I think my first, I think he called it back to action test is at 16 weeks.
Okay.
Back to action test?
I don't know.
Okay.
I have a test to take, I guess.
All right. You're going to pass.
Studying.
I hope. No kidding. I think 20 weeks I'll be running. And so we'll see how that goes.
We'll keep everyone updated.
Yeah, absolutely.
We appreciate your prayers with that.
Yeah.
Holiday season.
Yeah, holiday season. So, Tony, let's jump in right here. Let's start off with a big one. Let's start off with this concept of family dynamics. Let's start off big, in-laws. Right. So this brings a lot of differences in families, rules, expectations,
parenting styles, grandparenting styles.
So all these different things. Let's jump into this topic.
Sure. I think the first thing you want to think about, and you guys kind of said that, is all families have rules or expectations, how they operate, how they run, and you're joining that family, right? If you're going to your in-laws, you're joining that family. And you need to respect those rules. Even if they're dumb or they don't make sense to you, or you think that's crazy or that's weird, or why does your family do that? Why do they do those things that way?
Do you have any examples of these dumb
crazy rules,
dumb things that you've heard over the years? Definitely not your personal family
that
you've heard.
Better not use my own, right?
Right.
But we all have them. But it's just things, and it's even very simple things like, does your family, for Thanksgiving, do they all get together and play games and do stuff, or do they just sit and watch football?
Sure.
Right? One isn't really better than the other, but if you're coming from a family who likes to play games and do a bunch of stuff, and then nobody's doing anything, right? They're relaxing, or some people go shopping and do those things, and it isn't always going to make sense to you because it's different. And you have to respect those differences instead of trying to change them.
Sure. Or I know with Christmas, some families will do gifts on one, Christmas Eve, and then, or other families might do it on Christmas Day, or even
Exactly.
things
It's
like
another good
that. Or
one.
like, when do you go to church? Do you go to church on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, or both? Things like that, that someone might have grown up their whole life going, to church on Christmas Eve and presents on Christmas, and then they get married and it's like opposite or something,
Correct. And when those things don't make sense, often you want to change them. Hey, why are they? That's dumb. Why do you open your presents on Christmas Eve? You should do that on Christmas Day. And you don't really realize that, but you're going in there going, hey, you should change your family. And when we say it that way, it doesn't sound very good, but that's kind of how it comes across and what we're doing. And then the other thing, just kind of with in-laws that you need to remember, especially when we talk about personalities of your in-laws, is respect your spouse's knowledge of your family. Right? There's a lot of times like, well, why does your mom say that? She can't say that. Or your brother shouldn't act that way. You need to tell your brother this. You just have to kind of remember, it's like, hey, your spouse has been in this family for a long time. They've dealt with them. They've done things. Some things they say don't work. Some things they've tried many times. And now you're coming in and you think you have this fresh, brand new, cool idea that you should try to fix your spouse's family. And the reality is this probably isn't going to work. They've already tried some of those things. And so it's just focusing more on that acceptance and respecting your spouse when your spouse says, hey, this is how my family operates. This is how they do things. We just need to work with that. That's not your husband picking their side over you. It's them giving you a bunch of knowledge, which is, this is how my family operates. Can you respect that and see that instead of like, well, that's dumb and we need to change that and that's different. If you can start to see that that's just differences and we got to respect and honor that, it makes it go a lot smoother.
That's good. What does that look like then? So Ryan's question was about in-laws, but what about when it's like your own family and maybe you did grow up totally different? So how do you manage those expectations with your spouse, and how do you even start to have that conversation of figuring out what your family is going to look like?
Yeah. And I think that's really important is when are you talking about your immediate family? How do we want our family to run? When do we want to open Christmas presents? How do we want to do that? You want to start that way and work your way out, right? So that's where you guys have a lot to say. Is like, hey, we can decide this is how we want our family to do. These are the traditions we want to create and do. Okay, instead of trying to say, hey, this is what we want, so your family needs to do it my way now. It's like, nope, you're going to start with your immediate family and have those discussions and those compromises. And that's just like with anything is you guys don't match, couples don't match on spending habits, on if they're morning or night people, all those kind of things. You're certainly not going to match on how you want exactly your holidays to go and how you want your Christmas traditions to go, but that's where you talk about it and compromise. And that's the part where you guys have an equal say and you can kind of do stuff. You don't have equal say with your in-laws.
Sure. Ryan, do you feel like there were things that we had to kind of compromise on when we got married? Or maybe Tony, if you have an example of you and Michelle. I'm just trying to think back. Tony's wife is also named Michelle.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back to when we got married.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, and maybe Tony, you can talk about this for couples that are newly married or coming together, of even setting that schedule of like, okay, we're going to go here for this for Thanksgiving, we're going to go here for Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, and how do you blend those? I mean, that was
question.
one thing I guess that we, so like your family, Michelle, always, travels for Thanksgiving, and that was just something that I guess part of, I think my parents moved. And so then it just was kind of like naturally worked out where, well, yeah, we're not going to travel across the state to go for Thanksgiving.
Right. But the kids as grandparents accommodated, and they now have that side of the family has Thanksgiving on Wednesday, which is really generous of them to make that compromise so that we could go to Minneapolis. We had to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So when you talk about like newlywed married people, that's a really big thing. That's a big challenge a lot of times is when you're first dating, you think, oh, we'll go to your family and then we'll go to mine. You kind of share and do that. And then all of a sudden, the two of you, now you're a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you have a kid, and then it's like, whoa, what do we want our family to do? And those are the times where you have to set some boundaries. Like, it's like, you know what? We just want to do our family on Christmas morning. Well, if you always went to one of your spouses or one of your in-laws for Christmas, now all of a sudden you have to tell them no. And setting those boundaries to create your own family is really pretty tricky, but it's stuff that you have to do, and you're going to have to set those boundaries many times throughout life, right? Whether it's a Christmas or a holiday, then it's going to be when you have kids. How do you set some of those boundaries? This is how we want to raise our kids, and these are the things that we want to do. But holidays always bring up one of those things where it's like, all right, now you guys are a family, and if you're newlywed, this is the first time you're a family. What tradition do you want? And how do you want that to look? And sometimes those traditions get created because we're trying to squeeze in a different time in between all that stuff. And then sometimes it's like, nope, we're making this important in doing that. And you kind of had mentioned, usually families, as they get bigger, they get a little more flexible. It's like, oh, you talk about that family can do that on Wednesdays, or we'll do that. My family, my mom was a nurse, so we naturally were always pretty flexible because sometimes she had to work on Christmas and do that. And so some of that stuff is flexible, and then other things aren't. But that's the stuff where you just want to kind of work your way out. But you start with your own family.
Sure. Yeah, that's great. What about blended families? What would it look like for a blended family?
Blended families, everything we just talked about, times 10.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah,
It's just
I can't
way
imagine.
harder.
Yeah.
So we talked about sometimes it's one person joining another family. Sometimes you can get up to 3 or 4 different families kind of all trying to work and figure that out and do that. And they don't always all get along, and it's all different. And so you just have to kind of remember there's going to be a ton of differences. And if you go into it trying to change those differences, you're going to butt heads and you're going to fight. And to kind of think families, they're just like your spouse, right? You and your spouse, one's a spender, one's a saver, one's a morning person, one's a night person. If you're trying to change your spouse to be different, you have a lot of conflict. As soon as you kind of adjust and goes like, all right, how do I make this work? How do I work? How do we compromise? How do we make that work? That's the same thing with families on a bigger scale. They're going to be different. They're not going to match you. If you keep trying to change them to get them to join how you see the world, probably not going to go too smooth. As soon as you're like, all right, how do we make this work? And with blended families, that gets really tricky. It's like, how do we make this work? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to have happen? But people that are in blended families know that's the hardest relationship, period, because there's so many dynamics to it.
Yeah. Lots of moving parts and schedules. And then if it's, even a shared custody of kids, the kids' schedules, and, if that's on both sides, it's, I'm sure, very, very tricky.
And that's just the facts. You were talking about schedules and kids and this. There's these, that's that my ex, that's a person I didn't get along to. That person has this person. Why do I have to accommodate my ex's, her new husband's family schedule? And why do I have to accommodate that? Because it impacts my life and it gets so far removed and different. And yeah, it gets tricky. And you just got to really remember is what are we trying to achieve here? What are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's so good. And we, Tony, this idea kind of started I don't know, a month or so ago when you were last here.
Yep.
And we were talking about this, and specifically around the holidays, where it's almost like I think you said there's this uptick in people coming in to your practice for this very reason. And there's so much pressure, there's so much expectation that's put on the holidays. For everyone to get along, and everyone like there's so much put on this. Maybe walk us through, like, what are you seeing, and like, what are you helping people with during this time?
Therapists, we get really busy right before the holidays, and we get really busy right after the holidays. People want to gear up before they go and see their family because it's stressful and tricky. And then after they've had some time with their family, they're like, we need to debrief. We need to unpack and do that. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm helping with families is just helping them with their perspective, is reminding them is, what are you doing? Why are you trying to do the stuff that you're doing? And having those, we talk about those rules and expectations, right? So are you going to Christmas to tell your crazy uncle that he's living his life wrong? Is that why you're going there?
Probably not.
No,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But that's what they'll talk about, and that's what they'll be worried about. Oh, I'm worried about him because he's going to talk politics, or he'll talk this, or he'll do this, and I don't know how to handle that, and he doesn't respect me, and he doesn't do this. And we just have to slow down and go, are you going to try and change him? That's not the reason you're going. And just to kind of recognize people are different. We talked earlier about newlyweds. Think about a lot of times when newlyweds get married and then they visit, and the wife will go like, I'm not really sure if your mom likes me or not.
Hmm.
I just don't feel like she likes me.
Mm.
And then you start to explore that a little bit. You're like, well, why? Well, she doesn't say much, and she's not really outgoing, and she's pretty quiet. Okay. She actually might be that way for everybody in the family. But
Yeah.
if that person is coming from, well, my mom is really outgoing and she's bubbly and we talk about everything, and then I go into this world and it's quiet, all of a sudden it feels like, oh, she doesn't like me and we're not good.
Sure. And that perception feels
Yeah,
like
and there's
reality
that thing
too.
is we just have to take that step back, is maybe that she's just quiet and reserved and she's that way to everybody. Why are you expecting her to be just like your mom? And then when we start to slow people down and get them to think that way, it just makes those visits a little bit easier. It's like, hey, it sounds to me like your husband's mom is treating you just like she treats everybody else in the family. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Instead of, well, she's not like my mom. Nope. And then they get really kind of nervous. So it's just kind of recognizing those dynamics as, why are you doing what you're doing? And what's your perspective in it all?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's such a great, point, because I think, Michelle, I'm just thinking about this. Like when I came in to your family, like our families are entirely different.
Mhm.
And not anything,
Not in bad ways.
not
Yeah,
not
just
in
they're
not in
different, yeah.
bad ways at all. But if I came in with an expectation of that it needs to be like mine, that's gonna be there's gonna be conflict.
Yeah.
And I think of that of so many things as we put these expectations on holidays, and as you visit with this person and this person, if you have that, or think, going into it that it needs to be done, well, it needs to be done this way, like it's just going to cause so much stress and so much like anxiety over the holidays and going to visit, instead of just really enjoying the time.
Right. And
being
that's
there.
probably one of the best tips that I can give people, is just to remember those differences aren't disrespect.
Oh, that's good.
So
Yeah.
when you go, hey, Michelle, your family didn't treat me like my family does. True, it's different, but her family didn't mean that disrespectful or rude or treating you bad. It's just different. So you just have to kind of remember, those differences aren't disrespect.
That's great
They're
advice.
just differences.
Yeah, really good.
So, Tony, what tips do you have, or maybe just help with our shifting our perspectives on just managing these stressful situations around the holidays?
Yeah, like we said, is those differences aren't disrespect. And the other one is always, are you joining a family or trying to create one?
Okay. Walk us through that,
Yeah,
the differences.
and we kind of talked a little about that. With your immediate family, we're probably trying to create a family. We're trying to
Sure.
create traditions. We're trying to create things. With extended families and in-laws, we just have to remember we're joining one. And so we can't bring a lot of expectations and rules and things. It's like, because too often we're trying to create this thing. It's like, hey, I'm trying to create your family to be like mine. Yeah, that's not going to work. We need to remember we're joining. We're not creating one. With your own personal family, you can create whatever you'd like. Traditions, rules, expectations, all that stuff. But always remember, when you're going out to visit, is you're joining. And even that is just kind of remembering, like, if you're hosting or not hosting. So you're going over to their house. Really remember what you're doing. It's like, I'm going to join your house.
Sure.
Okay, I'm going into your world.
As a guest.
As a guest.
Right.
Why am I going to be telling you this is how we need to do, get presents, and this is how we do things? It's like, whoa, you're joining them. You have a little control if they're coming to yours, but even from that perspective, you don't have a lot, right? It's like, I'm inviting your family to come to my house and do it my way.
Yeah.
No, you're not, right? You're hosting
Yeah.
that family to come and participate at your house. And
Sure.
so just having that perspective is like, are you creating a family or are you joining something?
It's a great perspective shift and just really kind of setting that expectation. Am I joining or am I creating? That's so good. And why are you going? I think you asked that earlier. Why are you going? Is it to change them or is it to just spend great family time and create memories? Why are you going?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of that even, Michelle, we were talking about this for Thanksgiving and just how different even, so my nephew on my side of the family, our nephew, joined us for Thanksgiving. And we had talked about this, about how like, oh man, I bet like this was so different for him than what he's experienced in the past.
Yeah.
And, part of it is I do think when you come in with an open mind and you come in as, you're joining, like it can open up a lot of fun things.
Yes.
And it can be a lot of fun and not be, not always be stressful because you're not doing what you've always done, but maybe it's something new that will be fun.
Yeah.
That's a great example, Ryan. And granted, this is like our nephew. It's not like he had a whole family or anything, but he's going to college close to us. For him to go home over Thanksgiving would have been like 13-hour drive.
Yeah.
So he just is so open-minded. And I do feel like that resulted in him having a ton of fun. And he learned new family traditions and he experienced things. And he went to 2 other sides of the family, not the O'Connor side, but 2 other sides of the family. And it really was fun.
Yeah.
And he kind of just took it all in with fresh eyes and just rolled with it. He was like, sure, I'll go do that. Sure, I'll try that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great example of that.
A great attitude. That's what you want to have, is like, I want to try something different. I want to see it different instead of like, why isn't it the way I'm expecting it to be?
Right.
It sounds like he went into it with, show me what you got. What's different? Let's see this all. And he had fun. And you guys had fun showing it to him.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was fun.
Yeah. So I think, Michelle, we want to kind of wrap this up, but we want to put a little teaser out there.
Yep. Let's do it.
Really, we encourage you to tune in to our 5-Minute Friday episode to really talk about, what's the goal of all of this?
Hey, did you have to work in a soccer analogy there? That was you, Tony.
Yep. Got to always have a goal. We're always shooting for a goal. We're trying.
Yeah. So
I love that.
We have all these different dynamics and all of this, kind of coming together for the holidays. But what's the point of it?
Yes.
Like what is the goal? You're aiming up a shot here and you want to put it in the back of the net, Tony. We're going to wrap that up on 5-Minute Friday.
Yeah. So on Friday, we're going to talk about how to cope with families and how to have that right perspective and how to do that. The main question is, why are we going through all of this? Why are we going to do that? What's the goal? What's the goal in hanging out with your family? What's the goal? And so that's the tease.
Yeah.
It's going to be great. So thank you so much to our listeners for joining us today. Tony, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
Always so great to have you. And we would love to walk with you. Join us at Celebrate..church/marriage for resources. And we hope that you have a great week.
Have a great week.